The storyteller welcomes you to another nightmare. Plug in your earphones, close your eyes, and let us begin.
The desert doesn't forget. It doesn't care who you are, but it remembers what you've done. I used to make a living smuggling people through the Sahara. I thought I was untouchable, but on my last trip, something followed us. My name is Rafik. For 10 years, I trafficked desperate souls from one hell into another, across the Sahara Desert. For a price, I could get you into Libya. No promises, no refunds. Some made it, many didn't, and I never looked back, never felt a thing. I just counted the money, until the woman in the veil came. She showed up at night, alone, calm. Her name was Samira. She wore a black veil with golden thread, covering all but her eyes. She didn't beg. She hired me, paid in full with crisp money in a leather pouch. Too much money. My gut told me something was off. But money is money, right? So I loaded her onto the truck the next morning with 20 others. We set off. The heat was brutal, but we were used to that. On the second night, one of the migrants, a boy named Farid, vanished. His blanket still laid out, his shoes by the fire. No prints, nothing. The others panicked. I told them he probably wandered off. The desert takes the weak. But the next night, 2 more were gone. And Samira just sat there. Not a drop of sweat, not a speck of sand on her. Our trucks began to fail. Brand new batteries dead. GPS useless. Compass needles spun like drunk dancers. Then came the whispers. At night, I'd hear them in the dunes, chanting in a language I didn't know, but somehow understood. I'd wake up soaked in sweat, convinced I saw someone, something crawling just outside the firelight. Not human, not animal. My driver Hamid ran screaming into the dark one night. Said he saw a boy we'd left behind years ago. He never came back. The wind hit us like a wall, blinding sand from all directions. We took shelter, half buried in dunes. In the middle of that storm, I swear I heard my name whispered over and over. When it passed, we were down to 2 trucks. The rest were swallowed, and still Samira sat untouched. I snapped. I grabbed her, screamed in her face. She just stared, then opened her satchel. Inside were teeth, a child's sandal, a shriveled finger, stained with dried blood. These, she said, belong to the ones you left behind. She told me the desert had spirits, jinn, that feed on greed and betrayal. She said traffickers were cursed to carry the weight of every soul they sold. You don't move people, she said. You carry debts. I'm only here to collect. And then she walked away into the desert. No footprints, not a single mark in the sand. A few days later, a rescue patrol found me, alone, wandering barefoot, naked, delirious, covered in burns and strange carvings in my skin. Symbols I'd never seen. The trucks, gone. The migrants, gone. Samira, gone. They said I should have died. Now I live in hiding. My money, gone. My name, cursed. But the desert didn't let me go. Every night, I hear whispers behind my walls, footsteps outside my door. Sometimes, I wake up with sand in my mouth. And when I close my eyes, I see her, Samira, still walking across the dunes, no prints, no shadow, just those eyes, watching, and I know she's still collecting. Some debts can't be buried, not even in the desert.
before we move on to the next story, if you like true scary stories, please subscribe to Storyteller and click the bell icon for more creepy tales every week.
Have you ever seen your own face staring back at you on someone or something that shouldn't exist? I did, and I wish to God I'd never walked out into that desert, because what I met out there wasn't just a ghost. It was me. I grew up in a tiny hut in the middle of the desert. No neighbors, no electricity, just wind, heat, and silence. I lived with my father, a man whose words dried up years ago, and my stepmother, whose presence was worse than the silence. She never blinked. I swear to you, never once. She whispered to herself constantly, like she was reciting some prayer, or maybe a curse. I only heard it when the wind stopped. My job? Work at our food truck parked by the highway. 10 hours a day, frying meat in the heat, serving angry drivers. No breaks, no water unless I earned it. And every night, she'd hand me 2 heavy pitchers and a flickering lantern and say, "Time to fetch the water." 7 miles, alone, through dunes that moved like they were breathing. I did it every night, left just after midnight, came back before dawn. The well was old, stones crumbling, ropes fraying, but the water was clean, cold, deep. The walk there was quiet. The walk back was not. Some nights, I'd hear laughter, dry, cracking, like someone choking and laughing at the same time. Sometimes I'd hear footsteps that matched mine, until they didn't. One night, I swear I heard someone say my name. Not shout it, breathe it. I told myself it was the wind. It always was. Until one night, it wasn't. That night felt different, heavier. As I walked back, I saw someone ahead. A boy sitting on a rock in the moonlight. Same size, same face, same clothes. He smiled when he saw me, like he'd been waiting. "Your name's Amir, right?" he asked. I nodded, heart pounding, skin ice cold. He said, "Me too. I live just over that hill. My stepmom sends me to the well too. Every night, we sat and talked." He spoke softly, like he was afraid the desert might hear us. Everything he said sounded familiar. Then I asked, "How long have you been doing this?" He paused, looked up at the moon, and he said, "Since I died, 3 years ago." I didn't scream, couldn't. I just stood up and ran like the sand was on fire under my feet. When I got home, something was off. The door creaked open too easily. The lanterns were all lit, though I hadn't lit them. And then I saw it. A photograph, nailed to the wooden frame of the door. Picture of me, faded, worn, like it had been there for years. Inside, my stepmother sat by the fire, sharpening bones. Not wood, not sticks, bones. And she was humming, a melody I didn't know, but somehow I remembered. I didn't speak, didn't tell my father. He wouldn't have heard me anyway. He just stared at the ceiling these days, eyes darting like he was watching something crawling above us. I laid in bed with the blanket pulled to my chin. Didn't sleep, couldn't, but just before dawn, I drifted, and that's when I heard it. Knock, 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 soft, gentle, like fingertips on wood. I opened the door, and there he was, me, the same boy, same face, same dead smile. He held up a heavy, dripping pitcher. "You forgot this," he whispered. "It's your turn now." Since then, the knock comes every night, always just before dawn, always him. I don't open the door anymore, but I still hear him, standing there, breathing. Sometimes I hear 2 sets of footsteps now. Sometimes I see my picture nailed to other doors. I don't know if I ever really made it back from that walk. Maybe I died. Maybe I'm just stuck. But if you ever find yourself in a desert and you meet a boy who looks like you, don't talk to him, don't follow him, and never forget your water. Have you ever stood in a place so empty, so silent, that the silence itself feels like it's watching you? I did, and that silence wasn't the worst part. It was what was lurking just beyond the dark, what followed me out there, what watched me every night. I can still hear it now, whispering to me through the static of the desert winds. But I'll start at the beginning. I wasn't doing well, just drifting from job to job. So when I got the call about guarding an old solar facility in the Salt Flats, I didn't think twice. The pay was decent, and it was 3 nights of work, easy enough. It was as isolated as they come. The kind of place people forget about the minute they leave. A decommissioned research site, abandoned for years. No one around for miles. Just the endless, shimmering salt flats, as far as the eye could see. They told me to check the gates, patrol the perimeter, and make sure no one sneaked in to steal scrap metal. I wasn't worried until nightfall. It was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that presses down on you. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, the facility was engulfed in shadows. I did my rounds, checking everything, locked doors, the security cameras. No signs of life, just the hum of the wind. But when I circled back to the east side of the building, I saw it. Burn marks. Big, deep scorch marks, like something had been dragged across the dirt. I chalked it up to a prank, some kids, maybe. But when I checked the surrounding area, the marks weren't consistent. They were moving like something had dragged itself across the ground. I ran my hand over the scorched earth, and a shiver ran down my spine. Felt wrong, like I wasn't supposed to be there, but I finished my rounds, trying to push the uneasy feeling aside. That night, I lay in the guard shack, staring at the ceiling. The radio crackled beside me. I heard whispering, soft, distant, but unmistakable, like someone was just beyond the walls, talking to themselves. I tried to shake it off, but the air felt thick, heavy. I couldn't get comfortable. By the second night, I was already on edge. I didn't want to admit it, but something was off about that place. The scorch marks were gone. But now there was something else. I saw figures. It was just after midnight. I was at the far end of the property when I caught movement in the distance. At first, I thought they were just shadows cast by the old research towers. But then they moved. Humanoid figures, not walking like normal people, more like they were gliding across the salt. Faint, glowing, and moving in eerie, slow patterns. I tried to convince myself it was my eyes playing tricks on me, but they weren't. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped closer, my heart pounding. But the figures were too far, and they didn't leave footprints. The salt was like glass, no tracks, no disturbances. Just these glowing, shifting shapes. I started hearing the whispers again, closer this time, louder. They weren't coming from the radio, but from the direction of the figures. The voices were calling. I had to leave, fast. By the third night, I was losing it. Couldn't sleep. I couldn't even think straight. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those glowing figures drifting silently over the salt flats, and I could still hear those whispers echoing in the back of my head. I was done. I was gonna pack up and leave, But then I heard the voice through the radio. It wasn't my dispatcher. It wasn't a call from the outside world. It was a voice I didn't recognize. It whispered, "Stay inside. Don't go out there until sunrise." I froze. My heart skipped a beat, but my body didn't listen. I grabbed the keys and walked straight out the door, against every instinct telling me to stay inside. I walked into the salt flats, flashlight shaking in my hand. The wind had picked up, howling like something was trying to drown out my thoughts. Then I saw them again. Those figures, glowing, shifting. This time they were moving closer. And they weren't just humanoid anymore. They were twisted, malformed, like they had been dragged out of the earth itself. I froze, caught in their cold, soulless gaze. That's when I heard it. The whispers, so clear, so close. The words, "You shouldn't have come." The figures stopped in their tracks, then slowly, agonizingly, turned toward me. My pulse raced. I started to run, heart pounding in my throat. But when I looked back, they were following, always just out of the corner of my eye, always just beyond my reach. I didn't stop until I was back at the facility, but the fear wasn't over. I don't know what happened next. I was back in the guard shack, slumped in a chair, breathing hard, shaking. The radio crackled again, and that voice came through, low and chilling. "It's too late." The next thing I knew, the sun was rising, and I was lying on the floor, my eyes burned. I couldn't open them. The pain was unbearable. I reached up, but the inside of my eyelids felt like they'd been set on fire. I was blind. They found me the next morning, lying in the shack, twitching. The scorch marks were all over my skin, burns that hadn't been there before. The doctors couldn't explain it. No one could. But I knew. I had seen it. The figures, the voices, they were still out there, still waiting. And now, I can't close my eyes without hearing those whispers again. "You shouldn't have come." Some places aren't abandoned. They're just waiting. Have you ever been somewhere so isolated, so dead, that the silence almost starts to speak to you? I thought I was just doing a simple job. A quick repaint of a billboard out in the Mojave Desert. Easy enough, right? But what I saw on that billboard, what happened there, well, it's something I can never forget. Let me take you back. The desert at night isn't like other places. It changes when the sun goes down. And what happened to me in those last few hours, beneath that billboard, still haunts me. I wasn't doing great for cash, living paycheck to paycheck, and then I got the call. A contractor in town needed a painter for an old billboard along Route 66. It wasn't much, just a simple repaint for a diner that hadn't been open in years. The billboard was faded, peeling, just a few miles outside of town, way out in the desert. The contractor was in a hurry. "It needs to be done by sundown or else," he said, but didn't explain why. I didn't ask. It was a quick gig and the pay was decent. He gave me a weird warning before I left. "Don't look too long at the faces on the billboard," he said. I chuckled. "What, you mean the creepy diner ads?" He didn't laugh. "Just don't. You'll see why." I thought it was just one of those strange things people say to make you feel uneasy, like a bad joke. I didn't think much of it. Took me about an hour to get there. The heat was already unbearable, the road stretching out in a straight line as far as I could see. No signs of life, no cars. The place was dead. The billboard stood alone in the middle of nowhere, towering above the desert like a ghost. A long-closed diner was painted on it, faded and cracked, Rosie's Roadside Diner, it read. The faces of the people in the ad were painted with smiles too wide, their eyes hollow, staring blankly out into the desert. I set up my gear, feeling the weight of the silence around me. I didn't understand why I felt so unsettled. I painted billboards before, but this one felt wrong. I got to work. The sun was setting behind the mountains, and everything started to feel heavy. As I painted over the old ad, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I looked up a few times, expecting to see someone, but no one was there. Not a soul in sight. But then, I started noticing something strange. The faces on the billboard, they were changing. Every time I glanced away and looked back, the smiles grew wider. The eyes, which were once dull and empty, began to follow me. It was subtle at first, just a slight shift, but it was enough to make my stomach twist. I laughed it off. I'm tired, I told myself. It's just the heat messing with me. But every time I focused on the painting, I couldn't ignore it. The faces, they seemed to be alive. By midnight, I had finished the repainting. I stepped back to admire my work, but the faces weren't what they had been when I started. The smiles, they were more than just smiles now. They looked hungry, and the eyes, they were waiting. That night, I stayed beneath the billboard, too exhausted to drive back to town. I laid out a blanket on the ground, trying to sleep, but it felt impossible. The wind howled through the open desert, and the shadows around me seemed to shift. I finally fell asleep under that oppressive sky, but what I dreamed, I was sitting in the diner, the same one on the billboard. The place was dimly lit, but there were people around me. Silent people. Their faces, though, were familiar. They were the faces from the ad. Only now they weren't smiling. They were staring at me, their eyes dark and hollow. Then they began to eat, but not like normal people. No, they weren't eating food. They were eating me. One by one, I watched their teeth sink into my flesh. I could feel it, the gnawing, the tearing, but I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, like some macabre spectator of my own destruction. I woke up with a start, gasping for air, heart pounding. The first thing I saw was the billboard. I blinked. I wasn't sure what I was seeing. Was it my tired eyes playing tricks on me? Or was something truly wrong? The faces on the billboard had changed again. And this time, it wasn't just their smiles. They were smiling at me. And right in the middle of the crowd, there it was, my face, grinning back at me. I stared at the billboard, unable to move. The other faces were still there, but now they looked hungry. Their eyes had turned into black holes, hollow and endless. The face in the middle, the one that was mine, was smiling wider than I'd ever smiled in my life. A grotesque, twisted grin that didn't belong to me. The air around me felt thick, like the desert itself was closing in. I felt like I was losing my mind. I looked at the billboard again, and the smile was wider. It was still growing. I could hear whispers in the wind, soft, raspy voices murmuring something I couldn't quite catch. I was on the verge of panicking when I heard it. A low, gravelly voice right behind me. "It's your turn now." I whipped around, heart racing, but there was nothing there. The desert was empty, but I could still hear the whispers. And then, I realized something that made my blood run cold. The faces, they were moving. They were closer. I didn't care anymore. I ran. I ran as fast as I could, back to my truck, but the desert felt endless. My legs were heavy, like the sand was pulling me back, dragging me toward the billboard. I don't know how I made it back to town, but I did. When I told the contractor about what happened, he just stared at me, dead-eyed. "You should have listened," he said. "That diner's cursed. It's not just the billboard, it's the place itself." I never went back to that desert, never went near that billboard again. But sometimes when I close my eyes, I see it, the faces, and they're still smiling at me. It's your turn now.